Kerwin Gaines here, host of The Agenda, back again. This season is going amazing. Thank you for making that possible. Thank you for tuning in. We appreciate it here at DETV. We had to bring back one of our previous guests, Mr. Charlie Copeland. Welcome back to the show. Welcome back to The Agenda. Why? Because who would have thought, Charlie, we had a civil discussion as opposing parties, different political parties. We had a civil discussion. 48 hours afterwards, there was an assassination attempt on the president. What else happened? There was a vice presidential nominee. The president currently gets COVID. We had to come back and have some discussion to try to figure out what the heck is going on. I'm very curious to know. I was in a hotel room Saturday. I'm sitting there watching the basic cable in the hotel room, and I see at first that the president, there was an incident, and then I saw blood on his face. And my first reaction was that, honestly, a microphone fell and hit him,
right.
Or a light fell and, oh, this is going to be a soundbite
Or
forever. Or he fell. No, that's a shot at Biden. I know you can't tell me.
Just trying to put him on equal footing or not footing, as the case may be.
Biden shot. But an assassination attempt.
Yeah.
Not since Ronald Reagan.
We're talking an inch, right? I mean, think what happened when George Floyd.
Right.
What if that shot had killed him? Mm-hmm. The anger that would have been, and again, who knows, right? I mean,
you believe that the country would have rioted?
I believe that there are a lot of people that would have said this was a setup. It was a conspiracy. I mean, even I was on the way to a concert. For those the Pretenders fans out there, I was going to see the Chrissy Hine and the Pretenders, and I got a text from my wife, and she said, Trump, it was just an assassination attempt. I'm like, what are you talking about? And then lo and behold, yeah. And the first thought that came into my mind was, uh-oh. Now some on the left are going to say, oh, this is a conspiracy. It was a setup to make him look like more of a victim, which then there were extremists. There were extremist crazy people who, everyone wants to come up with their own conspiracy. But then on the right, you look at it and you go, some of these folks who say, oh, the Russian collusion was false, which it was. The January 6th was not Trump's fault. And
you didn't say that was false.
Well, he did not storm the Capitol, right? And I don't blame, just like the shooter in this case, I don't blame Chuck Schumer or anybody on the left for this individual taking a shot at, because everybody has agency. You can go home, get a gun, and shoot somebody.
I agree.
That's your choice.
I agree.
And it's a terrible choice. It's a wrong choice, and we ought to hold you to the full extent of the law, just like every one of those close to 1,000 people that were inside the Capitol should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law, and they have been. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump, whether he behaved the way I would have liked him to behave, he didn't say, go storm the Capitol. He didn't grab a pickaxe and start chopping his way through.
He gave a lot of hints, Charles.
So what? Chuck Schumer stood in front of the judiciary, in front of the Supreme Court, and said, you will suffer the whirlwind. Watch out what happens to you, Brett Kavanaugh, if you follow through with these orders. And lo and behold, 2 weeks later, or a month later, some guy's arrested in front of his house with a gun going to get him. I don't blame Chuck Schumer for that. Mm-hmm. So why would I blame anybody, Donald Trump, for other people's actions? Other people can, you have agency, and we have laws to put you in jail when you break those laws.
We'll deal with January 6th on another day.
Sure.
We'll have a special January 6th edition. But this weekend, this gentleman took a shot at a previous president and a presidential candidate. What does this, and it goes back to what I was talking about before, our democracy sets the tone for other governments, other democracies throughout the world. People invest in this country. People depend on this country, whether or not we want to admit it, whether or not you want to like it.
Millions of people move into this country
because of our stability.
Because it is the greatest country in the world.
That too. Now we are showing them that maybe not.
Well, and I don't disagree with that, right? I mean, obviously, if we would. First of all, we don't want anybody assassinating anybody anywhere. Mm-hmm. But if it were to happen, we would say, oh, that's in one of these developing nations that doesn't have good governmental systems, doesn't have good security, doesn't have good protection, doesn't have good systems. And we have all those things. I would say, first of all, it's very disappointing that the head of the Secret Service didn't say, the buck stops with me.
I haven't heard that yet.
No.
I haven't heard that yet.
Just the opposite. She said, oh, well, we didn't have anyone on the roof because it was sloped. Well, the roof that the counter snipers were sitting on was sloped.
Right.
Oh, so I'm not going to protect the President of the United States because one of my Secret Service agents doesn't know how to, mount themselves onto a sloped roof?
And if you watch the video, the counter shot agent slipped a little bit.
Yeah, because he was on a sloped roof. And so my point is that when you are that incompetent, and then you have to admit, Kerwin, to make that statement, oh, well, it was a sloped roof, we didn't want to put anyone on it because it's dangerous. Your job is to protect. Your job is to take a bullet. Obviously, we don't want Secret Service agents just falling off roofs. And by the way, there are dozens of roofers in this city alone who don't fall off roofs every day. So to have the head of the Secret Service make that comment shows that she is a particularly non-serious person who should not be in that job and should be gone. And that's part of the problem in accountability at our federal. And this actually we touched on this last time, was that, and when I was saying the legislature is in charge, that is the most important part of government. We have not held our legislators to account. And then you have presidents writing orders, and then the next president comes in, unwrites those orders, and then comes in, rewrites those orders, as opposed to Congress writing laws. And in this case, when you execute the law, you should take responsibility for that. And I think one of the things that has Republicans particularly upset is that we are not enforcing the laws at the border. We're not enforcing the laws when it comes to educating our children. We're not executing the law in protecting candidates. And by the way, Joe Biden refused to give Secret Service detail to Robert Kennedy Jr., whose father was assassinated. Why not?
Let's before we start pointing the dirty end of the stick at people here, what do you think about Trump's pity bump that he's going to get in the polls because there was an assassination attempt?
I first of all, I will take umbrage at the terminology pity bump.
Okay, I apologize.
The man was hit by a bullet.
He was grazed.
An inch different, he's a dead man.
That is true.
And I don't think we should ever make light of violence against another human being. If it was in the bar and some guy put his finger on his chest, okay, fine. But that's not what this was. This was a high-caliber round shot from 130 yards away that missed his eye socket by an inch.
Do you think that there is going to be a significant rally in his voting because of this incident particularly? The fist pump at the end, he's walking down the steps.
Kind of incredible, wasn't it?
It looked like, to me, it looked
Remember,
like
as
he was on the ground, knowing the person that he is, he said, how can I capitalize from this movement?
Absolutely.
What can I do to make myself have more vigor and everything else? Anyway, he stands up and he pumps his fist.
You're going very deep, Kerwin, to say he's sitting there on the ground with his ear hurting, 4 guys lying on top of him saying, it's instinctive to him. I don't disagree that he's not, P.T. Barnum squared, but the greatest showman alive right now, with maybe the possible exception of Elon Musk, and he stood up and instinctivally knew that all these people out there know that I was just shot at.
This will be a soundbite. This will be something that will be seen. I don't know.
A year ago, Joe Biden, speaking to one of the military academies, the Naval Academy, trips over a sandbag, requires a guy to help him to get up. Meanwhile, Trump lifts 3 or 4 Secret Service people off him. They're trying to brush him off the stage. He says, wait. He turns to the crowd.
They lifted him up. He did not lift 3 or 4.
Well, he had to put his shoes back on because he knocked his shoes off. But the bottom line is you can't undersell the difference between the two gentlemen.
He sold it.
But the visual difference
about the guy
of Joe Biden being helped off the ground after tripping over a sandbag, and Donald Trump having the presence of mind, which our president currently does not have much presence of mind, turns to the crowd and fist pumps and says,
That was
"Fight."
for the pity bump.
And then you hear the USA, USA, USA. So you're asking me, do I think that he's going to get, I mean, the Republican convention was united beforehand. But with DeSantis and Nikki Haley showing up and a bunch of other people, even with a vice presidential candidate that some in the Republican Party have some issues with, especially around his Ukraine and Russian policy.
What is your opinion of him?
He's a brilliant guy.
It was a good movie.
I didn't see the movie. I didn't read the book. He's a brilliant guy, right? Top of his class, Yale Law School. Which puts him about 900 people ahead of where Joe Biden graduated from his law school, despite some of Joe Biden's earlier lies about where he graduated, class-wise. But anyway, and his wife's also a Yale Law School grad. Now, all that being said, and I'm a Duke grad, so I'm free to talk about the elite universities. I'm not sure the elite universities are all they're cracked up to be at this point in time.
I don't think you get what you pay for.
I don't disagree with that in the least.
So his degree,
but he was a venture capitalist and a best-selling author, elected to the Senate. Did not go through the normal political channels, so he's not a machine politician. Now, he may want to be one, but he did not come up that way. He jumped the line, and that's hard to do, especially in a state like Ohio, where there are lots of other people that were waiting in line for their slot, and he just elbowed right past him. So I think,
but that's politics.
Oh sure, yeah, oh yeah, and he comes from the Midwest, and he comes from a really tough. I mean, his mother was a drug addict. He was raised by a grandmother. He's gone living in very, very tough conditions. He's going to be able to speak to a lot of people who live currently in tough conditions because of what the political class has done to the U.S. economy by hollowing it out. Now, I would argue that the U.S. economy hasn't been hollowed out.
But can they really relate to him? I mean, he does not. He's not stepping out of a pickup truck wearing camouflage and Velcro.
Not camouflage, because frankly, those people are already on our team. What we're looking for are those undecided, unaffiliated voters who are saying, who will best represent me? And is it, let's be honest, Scranton Joe that's sort of the bloom is off that rose, right? And Vice President Harris can't speak to that, honestly. And Donald Trump certainly can't speak to that. So who in that race can, in the Midwest, where 3 of the 7 battleground states are, and are the only states, honestly, that are left in a competitive situation.
But they've won those states before. Those races were very close. Those races were very close. I think that the possibility is still there, depending upon a couple different situations. But what I worry about is the fact that former President Trump, he's not young either. Whether or not he feels like he is, regardless of how many tans he has and how many hair plugs he can place into his skull, he is not as young as people want to think that he is. The likelihood that one of our presidential candidates here will have to execute on their vice president is extremely high. To do a lot, is this the person, if elected, do we want running the country? We can say the same thing about Kamala. Is that the person we want? Because we're now at that point where we're having this geriatric election and we're forcing to put these people in here. Is this what we want to do?
So a couple of points. One, you're right that those vice presidential candidates mean a lot. I would contend a little bit on the age thing, because they both are about 80 years old. I know a lot of people who are 80 who are sharp as a tack. Well, I mean, Warren Buffett is in his late 90s, and he still runs Berkshire Hathaway, which is, and he's the world's top 10 wealthiest men. A brilliant guy when it comes to running companies.
But he's not getting the same questions with the same level of scrutiny.
No, he's actually doing a lot more.
Same level of scrutiny and visibility that the president has.
My point is that there are people who are 70 who are suffering Alzheimer's. There are people who are 98 who are getting up every day and analyzing the balance sheets, the business trajectories, the investment potential for hundreds of businesses. And so
what
makes
you think the president is currently not doing that?
Kerwin.
What makes you, because
How
he
about
stumbled on
today
words.
in his speech when he was giving remarks off of a teleprompter on 3 different occasions, he stopped his thoughts in the middle and said, well, anyway. It's obvious to any casual observer. God gave me the ability to remove blindness. I can't make you see. Joe Biden is not competent to be president of the United States. Donald
Not
Trump
competent. That's
is.
a very strong allegation. Competency?
Correct.
Competency?
Correct.
This man has ran the country for the past 3.5 years.
Woodrow Wilson was the last year in office. His wife ran the country because he had a stroke. I would contend that Biden's staff.
Biden's wife, Jill Biden is not running the country.
Biden's
currently.
staff is making the majority of the decisions. They may run some things past him, and I'm sure he's.
No,
But
I will not accept the fact
fine.
that he is a complete
and
sideliner.
this is where the country is right now, right? Is the difference that you and I are talking about right now?
Right.
Is the difference that the 2 different sides of the country.
Well, just to be clear, my problem is not with his ability right now. As a Democrat, I will tell you my problem statement, right? My problem is not what he is doing now. My problem is what he's going to be doing 24 months from now. Because the Joe that we have now will not be the same Joe 24 months from now.
Why do you think that? Why do you think that's the case?
Because at that time, he'll be 83.
So what? Like I said,
83.
Warren Buffett, there are hundreds, thousands of 90-year-old men
And if
who
you
are
think-
doing
if you
a
th- if
lot
you think for
and
a
are-
second
and mentally sharp.
that the board of Berkshire Hathaway does not take into account Buffett's age and their decisions that they make and their strategic planning for the next 2 fiscal years, you're crazy, Charlie. If you think that that's not a discussion.
First of all, they have dozens of people that they've been training over the years because any day somebody could be hit by a bus.
Right.
So, I mean, succession planning in the business world is not unusual. For well-run companies, it's unusual for some others. And so that is a little different. So, sure, your point about the vice presidential candidate, that's your succession planning. So you have a choice whether it's J.D. Vance or Kamala Harris. I think the argument you were making was that either Trump or Biden, the probability of having to pull that succession lever is really, really high. I would submit that the chance of pulling that lever for Joe Biden is almost a certainty. The chance for pulling it for Donald Trump, not so much. It's not 0, certainly, but I don't know that it's more than 20%. It may only be 2%.
Do you feel that this assassination attempt has changed, and I know that you haven't had a sit-down conversation with him. This is just general conversation.
I've never spoken to him, period.
Do you feel that it has changed his mindset or demeanor in a way that would shock America?
I don't know, and it's probably too soon to tell. I mean, we'll know a little bit more tomorrow night when he gives a speech to the convention, but we won't know. And I think some of those things might play out over time. I mean, Zhou Enlai, who was the Chinese foreign minister during the Nixon administration, when he was asked by Henry Kissinger, who was Nixon's Secretary of State, what do you think about the French Revolution, which happened in 1800, thereabouts? And Zhou Enlai's response was, it's too soon to tell. So when China has basically had a 2,000-year history, 200 years is small.
But there's something about surviving a headshot, basically. I think that is can change one's attitude.
Yeah, it would certainly change mine.
And let's be honest. President Trump has been combative in his statements. We've talked about that. President Trump has been very...
As has Joe Biden.
President Trump has been combative in his statements. He has learned very well how to drum up folks to, I wouldn't say invoke violence or what have you. Do you feel that this is a little bit of the medicine coming back at him? There's no way that you can say that Joe Biden's rhetoric is the same.
There are some.
His rhetoric
I don't
is
know
not
that
the
I
same.
would. Joe Biden has referred to people like me as a semi-Nazi. Now, Nazis killed 6 million Jews and hundreds of thousands of other people and caused global war. I don't know what a semi-Nazi is. Does that mean we just want to kill 3 million Jews and only have half the world? So, I mean, that is an over-the-top statement.
He is referred to you or people like you?
People like me, people on the right. And so I would suggest.
Do you want to know what they say about people on the what people on the right say about people on the left?
And by the way, I disagree with you. You've never heard me refer to anybody, my opponents, those people I disagree with, in any of those terms. Why? Because I believe in keeping a civil tongue, and I think most Americans believe in keeping a civil tongue.
And you feel that your candidate believes the same thing?
Oh, I did not say that.
Oh, okay.
I was just saying.
I just wanted to be clear.
I was just saying that political speech has been over the top by both sides. And you can say, well, your guys were worse than my guy. Well, if everybody's aiming at everybody else's kneecaps and my guy's maybe aiming at the waist.
Nobody's shooting at my guy.
You're lucky, right? and I thought it was the alt-right. They were supposed to be so violent. But again, my point is that the conversation you and I are having right now is the conversation that is being played out politically, why the country is pretty much split down the middle, going, well, which one of these tribes is worse than the other, as opposed to which one is reaching out to our better nature, which one is reaching out to the angels that are in us, as opposed to the devils that are in us, and we're not getting that, and it's sad. And it's indicative, in my opinion, of a systemic problem. Because I don't think humans and Americans have gotten any worse.
Well, Biden reached out with a phone call very soon after the incident.
Yeah, but
that's civil. I don't think that former President Trump would have done that.
So, well, and that is an opinion.
Do you feel the same way? Could you see former President Trump picking up the phone and saying, "Joe, sorry to hear that happen"?
Sure. But the truth of the matter is, there's no way to know. And so you have an opinion, which is, Orange Man bad, and he wouldn't call Joe if Joe got shot in the ear. And Demented Man good, and he called the guy that got shot in the ear. And maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong. It doesn't really matter in the big scheme of things, right? What is the big scheme of things is, how do you make more Americans flourish and prosper? How do we solve some of the country's problems with, I'm a firm believer in, if we had broader legal immigration and allowed more people in and checked the box and said, okay, we know who you are, we know what your skills are, we know what kind of jobs you're going to get, and we let in 1 million more people a year legally, and put a wall around the border and put some additional security around the border and kept the 7 other million people that have tried to come across the border out, we would have a better country. I don't think that's particularly complicated, but neither side is willing to do that, because one side has a voting bloc that wants open borders and the other side has a voting bloc that wants closed borders. And they're both singing to that specific voting bloc rather than helping the United States continue on its trail of being the greatest nation in the world. And that's the issue that you and I should be talking to our side, saying, why aren't you doing this? And when people say, well, we had this bill for the border and Trump said to stop it. I don't disagree with you. I don't know what was in the bill. I don't know. I'm sure there were some things in there I wouldn't have liked. Probably some things in there I did like.
Well, that's going to be the case.
And that is what the middle is for. And we don't have that anymore.
So you believe that immigration is the deciding factor for Republican voters?
I think it is a major one.
But the deciding one?
Well, I think the deciding one is, to an extent, is the economy. And where the economy has gone over the last 25 years as jobs have been outsourced to other places. I happen to think that free trade is an overall good. But if your manufacturing company, if your manufacturing company was shut down because they could get cheaper labor in Vietnam, and the shipping costs were lower and the labor costs were lower, so that it was cheaper to go do it there, and they didn't have the environmental rules, so you could pollute more, or whatever those reasons are, and so you lost your job, you're going to feel it, and you're going to be ticked off. And I don't disagree with any of that. And perhaps free trade made that shift happen too fast. You put China into the WTO, World Trade Organization, things like that. And so too many plants shut down too fast, and we didn't get a chance to steer into those future jobs, like with things like they've got with Zip Code Wilmington, where they're teaching people to code.
But so wouldn't you say that this is my Democratic math, okay? Yeah. Bear with me. Even though I agree with you with shipping off jobs to other countries, but I would also say that the crime rate followed that because people weren't working. My notion is that when people work, they tend not to do bad things because they have to go home and go to sleep, because they have to go to work the next day.
Right.
And as we ship those jobs away,
and
crime
by the way,
increased.
they have a payroll. They're getting paid. And so they, all things being equal, we always want like more money than less money, but I've got a job, I'm getting money, so I'm able to buy food, I'm able to buy shoes, I'm able to go to see a Phillies game once in a while. And when I'm not working and I'm going to get in a line, I look around and go, well, you know, I got time on my hand and I'm a young man under the age of 35, and so I've got a lot of energy, and I go and do things that I shouldn't do. I don't disagree with that. And so economic empowerment is huge. But if you look at a state like Delaware, we've done a lot of things to shut down economic empowerment, and therefore, we were the worst performing state economy in the nation last year. Delaware was the worst one.
And a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, like almost everybody.
And I'm going to be honest with you. I think that we do, and I'm very partial to Governor Carney. I think his administration has done a great job. But when it comes to business development, I don't think that we do a very good job here in the state of Delaware.
And it's tough. I mean,
and we've done that systemically, have not done a very good job.
For a long time. For a long time. And you just look at the city of Wilmington, which has suffered on a much smaller scale, but similar to Detroit, right? I mean, Detroit had 1.3 million people. It's got 700,000 people. Wilmington once had 150,000 people. It's got 72,000 people. And so, they've tried some things along the edges, but until you bring in employers who are willing to hire people and you start to rise up people through the economic ladder, but when you create and
you have kids that can barely read,
right? All those things, right? And so that's generational, right? I mean, and it's a cycle, and there are places that have executed solutions that have helped some of that. None of it overnight because it's tough, but we continue to go down the wrong road in Delaware, and we don't never have that conversation in Delaware because we are, and as I said the last time, because we're more worried about because our gubernatorial and mayoral election are during presidential years. So we're here sitting there talking about, well, if Joe had been shot at, would Trump call him? I don't know, but and it's immaterial to what the country is facing from here on out. The question is, will Trump change? I don't know that the lever changes his or her spots. So, but maybe a little bit. Could he come out and say, I want a unity in the country?
Well, I think he'll be more conscious of his words.
Perhaps. I hope so.
I hope so
absolutely
too.
hope so. I hope all candidates on the left and the right are more conscious about their words and talk more about the positives of the future and what they are. What's your positive vision? We don't get that. And I mean, I understand negative campaigning because it works. And that's why and look, I've campaigned a lot and I've used a lot of negative campaigning because it works. But by the same token, sometimes the mood changes and you want to be where the mood is. And what are we going to do to make Americans flourish and prosper?
I thought you were going to say make America great again. Before we close, what do you expect from the convention this week as they're wrapping up?
I think that the Republican Party is going to come out very unified, that there will be a bump in the polls because after every party's convention, there is generally a bump in the polls. And they will get back to the campaign, and the campaign will be less negative than it was before, because after you almost get assassinated, that message has been sent, right? You don't have to talk about that anymore. And so I think they will shift. I think the people that Trump has around him in his campaign this time are very professional, very good at what they're doing.
So briefly, Vance is helping or hurting?
I think net, he helps because people like you and me kind of dig deep in, but the person they're aiming to convince is going to hear about hillbilly elegy, the tough background, the guy that pulled himself up and is now the vice president of the United States. I mean, that's an American story, right? A guy born to tough circumstances who, because of hard work and his own intellect, was able to go to Yale Law School, graduate top of his class, become a venture capitalist, and now become vice president candidate of the United States. I mean, that is an American story.
So you don't think that Joe Biden, I mean, he has a very American story too?
Yeah.
That and so much more right here on the agenda. As always, thank you, Mr. Copeland, for coming in and having a discussion, a very heated discussion about what's going on in politics, not only in the state but in the country. We look forward to seeing you right here next week on the agenda.